As a firearms and combative instructor, I think one of the most important responsibilities that we have is to help ground people in a sense of reality. There's a lot of people who have a misconception about what fights are like, whether it's a fist fight, whether it's a fight with a knife or edged weapons, or whether it's a fight that involves a firearm. One of the most overused words in the combative landscape is the concept of mindset. People somehow have this false sense that when it goes bad, they're just going to will themselves to be able to be successful in a fight. That's really not the case. I always tell people mindset without practical defensive skills is a hallucination. So if you don't train, you're not going to be able to train. If you don't practice exploding, you're not going to be able to explode. So if you don't practice dynamic movement in a real encounter, you're not going to be able to move dynamically. So that's one of the things that we have to help ground people in, is a sense of reality. So when they start training, they're preparing for what a real engagement looks like. A long, hard rule or a guiding principle of firearms training for a long time has been something called the 21-foot rule. It's a training standard that law enforcement used for many years, and it basically says that a grown man can close 21 feet in a second and a half, or 7 yards in a second and a half. So oftentimes police officers train to what happens at 7 yards. Make sure you keep the threat at 7 yards so that you have time to respond. But we start looking at civilians and we start looking at police officers being killed. 65% of police officers are killed inside of 10 feet. 47% of police officers are killed inside of 5 feet. So the 21-foot rule in a second and a half has long been an outdated paradigm. When we look at civilian encounters, most civilian encounters are ambushes. A professional predator targets somebody, they wait until they get close to make a decision. That's when they draw their weapon from concealment. That's when they ask for your money. That's when they ask for the car keys. Because if a guy pulled out his weapon a half a block away from you and said, "Hey, guy with the red car, when I get up to you, I'm going to carjack you," you'd say, "Au contraire." You'd get in the car, you'd drive away. You'd run back in the house and lock the door. You go back in the office and you secure yourself away from the threat. So that's why civilian encounters are typically ambushes, or they escalate from a disagreement or a dispute between two people. We see it all the time in a parking lot, a fight over a parking space. Somebody accidentally door dings another person, and it escalates from there. It becomes violent. A homeowner, a land dispute between two neighbors. How many times have we seen two neighbors go to guns? So if it's going to happen from a civilian perspective, it's probably going to be up close and personal. So when it comes to your training, when you're going to the range, your training should reflect the realities of what encounters really look like. A gunfight is nothing but a fight that involves a gun. So just like a fist fight, you have to have a certain amount of physical conditioning. So one of the things that I recommend to people as a kind of training guideline is I like for them to focus 20% of their time on marksmanship training. That is actually going to the range, putting rounds down range. I like another 20% to focus on physical conditioning, because you may have to fight to earn the right to get your firearm into play. And if you have no cardio, if you have no strength training, how are you going to be able to deal with that? The other 20% we call force on force, where some type of dynamic encounter where it's with simulated bullets. It could be laser tag, it could be simunitions, it could be airsoft pistols, where you're actually drawing a weapon, shooting at another person. You're seeing, did I get hit? Were they able to move? Was I able to avoid things? So once again, you need that feedback from the dynamic encounter. And most of the times people realize the engagement is much faster than they ever would have imagined. The other 40% is what we call administrative weapons handling. It's dry fire drills with dummy rounds or snap caps or dummy bullets, whichever words you like to use for them. You can practice weapons manipulation, loading and unloading with the dummy rounds to help you get more comfortable in running the gun. So those are some training guidelines I like to encourage people to lean towards when they're starting to develop their defensive platform.